Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. I'm Peter Neglia. I'm one of the co-founders and general manager of Insider NJ. I work in partnership with Max Pizarro, who's our editor-in-chief and one of the best political reporters in the state, as well as Fred Snowflake, who's a veteran, respected journalist who joined us earlier this year, and in addition to the several columnists that we have from a variety of political backgrounds and experiences. Insider NJ, for those of you who don't know and who aren't readers yet, we're a nonpartisan news site that covers New Jersey politics and all of its glory and sometimes all of its gloom. We launched in February of last year, and we work day in and day out to provide solid reporting and information to our readers. And I like to think of it more as a political intelligence network rather than just a news site, sort of a common place for serious political players to get valuable intel and information. And people tell us all the time how they value Insider NJ as part of their daily news routine. And that value goes both ways. We're tremendously grateful for the loyalty of our audience, including some of you. And we're always looking for new ways to expand our reach and to partner with people like Dr. Harrison and great institutions like Montclair University. And this conversation is going to be really fascinating. So when it comes to New Jersey politics and government, you don't get more influential than Senate President Steve Sweeney. So it's truly an honor for us to be here and to be part of this. We'd also like to thank the sponsors, in addition to Insider NJ. So if you just give a quick round of applause as I name them out. The Department of Political Science and Law here at Montclair State. The College of Humanities and Social Sciences. The College of the Arts. The School of Communication and Media. The Center for Student Involvement. The Political Science Club. And the College Republicans and the College Democrats of Montclair State University. And we're also live streaming this on Facebook on the Insider NJ Facebook page, so we know there's many more people who are tuning in. So now I'm going to get down to the real reason why I'm up here, which is to introduce Dr. Harrison. She's a professor of political science and law here in Montclair State. She's the author of 5 books on American politics, including American Democracy Now!, which was published by McGraw-Hill and is now being revised into its 6th edition. She's a frequent commentator in print and electronic media on New Jersey politics and U.S. politics. And this conversation is part of the Political Science and Law Department's Salon series, which aspires to create a dialogue between important policymakers and the Montclair University community, which, as we all know, is very important in this day and age. So now I'll hand it over to Dr. Harrison and Senate President Sweeney, who are coming onto the stage as we speak.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you all for coming out for this first of our Salon series. Let me introduce the Senate President. New Jersey State Senate President Steve Sweeney represents the 3rd Legislative District, which includes portions of Gloucester and Cumberland counties and all of Salem County. From 1997 to 2010, he served on the Gloucester County Board of Chosen Freeholders, where he was director from 1998 until 2010. First elected to the New Jersey Senate in 2001, he has been reelected 5 times and was chosen by the Democratic majority to lead the Senate in 2009 and again in 2013 and 2017. An iron worker by trade, Senator Sweeney sponsored laws to raise New Jersey's minimum wage and has advocated for legislation to create New Jersey's paid family leave program. Earlier this year, he established a bipartisan panel of legislators and economic experts to develop reforms that address the state's most challenging fiscal problems. The Economic and Fiscal Policy Work Group issued a series of far-reaching recommendations that aims to avert crisis conditions, maintain financial stability, reduce the cost of government, and allow the state to support vital needs and services. Please join me in welcoming the Senate President Steve Sweeney. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
So before we begin discussing the path to progress, can you just give the audience a little bit of context and talk about how you first became involved in politics?
When I turned 33, I had my second child. I had a daughter and she was 2 pounds. She was born 2 pounds, and we were in the neonatal unit for about 75 days, and halfway through, we found out she had Down syndrome. And Brigid, I got to tell you, if you want to talk about like a building falling down on top of you when you hear those words, and I'll never forget the doctor telling me, he says, you know, you've been given a great gift. Well, when you're told your child has a disability, you really don't think you're fortunate at the time. But looking back and going forward, it was the greatest gift in the world, because I noticed it's like you're born into a different world. You know, all of a sudden you realize things that are different for what, you know, just for whatever reason. And I didn't like the way people would look at my daughter, make faces, comment. And, you know, when people say you don't like something, if you don't like something that's going on in your world, well, do something about it. Well, I'm a union iron worker. I didn't go to college, but I decided I was going to make a difference for people with disabilities. And I ran for office on the county level. The Democrats asked me, and 3 days later, the Republicans asked me to run for the same spot, but the problem is I'm a Democrat. You know, even when people don't think I am, I'm a Democrat. And I ran for office, and I told everybody, I said, you understand, if I run, first thing we're going to do is build schools for special needs kids. And we built an amazing campus for special needs kids in Gloucester County called Bankbridge. And it gives parents choices, like, you know, it gives options for parents with children with special needs, because parents normally have the best judge of character of where would be best for the child. In fact, the last 2 things we built a special school for autistic children. Lights, colors, textures, sounds, everything to really maximize the seat time for a child. And then the last project was a thing called ACT, Adult Career Transition, where when people age out after 21 of education, they basically go to college, and they learn life skills and job skills. And I got to tell you, it's been amazing. My daughter's 25 now. When she turned 18, she wound up with a boyfriend, which really did not make me happy. And well, I didn't think I'd have to deal with that. And then she turns 21. She says, you know, Dad, I can drink now. And I said, oh, my God. I says, Lauren, your dad's favorite beer was O'Doul's. And she actually believed me. I got lucky. But my point is, my daughter is living a very full, complete life, as complete as she can. And creating a structure where you give people with disabilities the opportunity to live a full life is what I've really shot for in my life. And I think we've done some good things. We got a lot more to do. We banned the word retarded. Right. I think that was a big thing, because, you know, sometimes words are meant to praise or hurt. But we all know they matter. Words always do matter. So, you know, Brigid, we did some good things, got a lot more to do. But I'm an advocate for the disabled, and I'm proud of it. And when I get out of this stuff, I'll still be doing it.
Right, that's from the heart. So in 2017, you were targeted by the NJEA. I know that impacted your family as well,
yeah.
And that was not a good scene. It was the most expensive race in legislative history. And I believe you were targeted because you wouldn't post a constitutional amendment that would have prioritized contributions to the state's public employee pension system over other allocations. Can you talk a little bit about the context of that race and what it was like, what you learned from it, and how it shapes how you move forward?
Well, it was the most expensive legislative race in the history of the country.
Right.
Just so I want to be clear, not New Jersey, the country. And I made the history book, at least for now. They harassed my son. My son's a member of the NJA. They harassed him on a regular basis. You know, he almost quit his job because he was like, Dad, how much more am I going to take? And it got pretty nasty, and for one simple reason. They didn't want to tell their members the truth, Brigid. They wanted me to put up a constitutional amendment after we had just passed a gas tax that everyone knows about. And people were angry as hell. And if we had passed that constitutional amendment, it would have failed. So I went to some of their leadership of the NJA. I said, you know, this will fail. They said, well, look, our members need to know we're doing something. I said, but even if it fails, I said, no governor will ever fund the pension system.
So you mean if the amendment had failed, you thought that would have had a net decrease in governors willingness to pay for pensions moving forward?
Well, if the people of the state of New Jersey say, we don't want you to pay this, it would give any governor the excuse to say, hey, listen, I'm just listening to the taxpayers. They want relief. They want reform. And unfortunately, I should have took the political side and given it to them. Looking back, if you want to reflect back, but I was always taught if you're going to take positions like this in leadership, then you lead. You don't punt. You don't give someone, you don't take the easy way out. I've never done that in my career, and I don't know if it's helped me, but I know at nighttime I can go to sleep that I've done the right thing.
And I mean, it comes from the context that you yourself are a union leader and have enjoyed great support from organized labor in all of your political contests. Has it impacted how labor is supporting you now?
Well, I have my challenges, but again, I'm not afraid to tell the truth. In my world, in the private sector, Brigid, with unions, if you don't manage your costs properly, you can go out of business. There's competition. And what people think, that's me, I'm sorry, but what happens is people think because you have the ability to tax, you just tax. And at the end of the day, is that me?
I don't know if it's
I guess it's me.
Maybe it's the NJ.
It might be the NJA. But we don't have, taxpayers are taxed out in this state. We have the 5th highest tax burden in the United States of America, and it's going to get worse unless we do some things that are not popular.
Well, that's a perfect transition. So tell us a bit about this work group that you formed.
Well, back at the end of the year, after we had finished the Christie administration, we knew we had some real financial challenges. So without doing any formal government action, because that's what you normally do, you do a resolution or some kind of thing to create this blue ribbon panel, I just got a hold of a couple senators at this time. It was Senator Steve Orho, a Republican, Paul Serlo, that's a Democrat, and I said, look, we got a problem. Let's get together, see if we can figure it out. And then we reached out and got really the best and the brightest that New Jersey has to offer between economists, government experts, tax experts. There's a guy named Richard Keevy who's basically been everywhere and done everything, Mark Pfeiffer, who knows government better than anyone else. And we put this group together, and it was funny. Other legislators were coming to us. Can I join? I was like, yeah, sure. And, because it was great that people wanted to participate in it. Well, this working group came up with 200 recommendations that we broke down into 5 working groups. They knocked it down to 58 recommendations, down to 32, which is the stuff that we put out on Pathways to Progress. And these are the things we feel that need to be done now if we have any chance of really turning the economics of the state around. Because all we're doing right now is investing in 2 areas of government, which is our pension and healthcare systems, but we're not funding higher education. We're not funding other places that are really, really important to us.
So you mentioned the 5 areas. Let me go through them for members of the audience. So that was the pension and benefit reform, that's part of it. Education reform at the administrative level, county and municipal reform and shared services, state and local tax structure, and leveraging assets to stabilize the pension system. So can you give us an idea of what we're talking about from a budget standpoint, just an overall big picture?
Well, if we don't do something pretty soon, right now, we have wage, wealth growth in this state every year, about 3%. It comes up to about $1.1 billion a year. This year, the pension and healthcare system is going to eat up all $1.1 billion. And if you look at the chart behind me, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that we're on a course that we can't fund these things anymore. So, like I said, it's hard when it's behind you, but when you look at the numbers, they're staggering. So, that's why we came up with some recommendations we think that'll slow the curve. Right now, we're on a projection. Like we're going like this. We put 3.2 billion in for the pension system, not million, 3.2 billion this year into the pension system. On the way to 6.7. Now it took us 6 years to get to 3.2. I have 4 years to get to 6.7. It's not doable. Even raising taxes like we've raised taxes, it's not doable, and it's making New Jersey really an uncompetitive state, and healthcare is going to grow by another $700 million. So if we don't address this, And I was talking to Dr. Cole earlier. We will not invest in higher education. We're the second most expensive public higher education system in the nation. So, we don't have the money to invest in the areas that actually strengthen and grow your economy. Everything's being gobbed up in just two areas. And it's unfortunate because this is going to be, look, I want to work with the unions. I want to negotiate with the unions. That's what I do for a living. But they have to come to the table now because we can't survive where we're going.
So, and this is assuming a relatively non-recessional rate
Yes.
of growth. So let's talk a bit about pension and benefit reform. And I'm going to read a quote from the report. Shifting new state and local government employees and those with less than 5 years of service from the current defined benefit pension system to a sustainable hybrid system, preserve the current system for employees with over 5 years of service who have vested contractual pension rights. Can you talk a little bit, first off, explain this to us, and talk a little bit about how that hybrid system would work?
Well, first, anybody that is vested in the pension system, that's 5 years or more, you would get the promise that they made as far as the pension, which you would get it when you retire.
And what kind of employees are we talking about? I'm sure some people don't even know what we're looking
Well, we're talking about all state workers. You're talking about teachers. You're talking about state workers. You're talking about, again, everybody that we provide pensions for. The police and the fire just took their pensions over and managing their pensions. They've taken over responsibility for theirs, and I'm really proud of them for what they did. But we need leadership in these other areas in order to fix this. What we're talking about is a pension on the first, basically $40,000, and then anything else above would be a cash balance, like a 401k. So it's a hybrid. Because I believe in pensions. I believe strongly in pensions. It's just that, again, Brigid, if we don't adjust what we got going on right now, and by I think it's 23, we're going to have a $3.2 billion deficit. So we can't raise taxes like that. So, by restructuring, you slow the curve. You slow that growth curve you almost flatten it out. Under Governor Christie, there was the Byrne-Healy report. The Byrne-Healy report was a hard stop, like everybody right now out of pensions into a 401k. There was a couple problems with it. One, it's unfair, but the other problem was it would have caused us to have to come up with a $1.4 billion payment now. So it was a budget issue for us. We couldn't come up with it if we wanted to. So searching for solutions, we came up with this. We call it a soft start instead of a hard stop.
And so what would that hybrid, do you have an idea of what that hybrid plan would look like in terms of the differences if someone was hired tomorrow as opposed to someone who's been in their employment since, for 10 years or so?
We feel that changing to this system, we would save $3 billion statewide. That's county, municipal, and the state. The state would save about $1 billion. But for the worker, it wouldn't be much of a change because the people that are vested, nothing is changing for them. And if someone's coming into a teaching job or wants to work at the DEP in the Trenton, this is the deal, this is the package you're going to get when you get there. So, you'll go into it knowing what you have and knowing the other most important thing is that it's sustainable. Because, people say pensions can't go bankrupt. Well, they do. And that was one of my big arguments before with people, no, it can't happen. Well, it can happen, and it does happen around the country. And what we're trying to do is prevent a collapse of the system because we can just continue. I said to somebody the other day, if I sometimes regret not doing what we did in 2010 and 11. We did major benefit reform then. If we hadn't done it, in 2017, the teachers' pension system would have been bankrupt. I mean, they're just numbers. It's not anything to get emotional about. They're numbers.
Talk a little bit, if you would. There's one of the recommendations is a switch from the platinum benefit health plan into gold benefits. Mm-hmm. And so the idea, of course, is that this is going to save the state money. There's also a line in the report that says that this would save workers money because obviously their premiums would be reduced. I'm assuming that that would also parallel with some increase in out-of-pocket expenses. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a platinum and a gold plan?
Well, platinum plan is basically says they pay 90% of the cost.
So the employer or
The
state
employer pays.
90% of the cost.
Gold is you pay 80% of the cost. Well, in New Jersey, we pay 97%. There's not another state in the country that's close to us. And again, it's nice if you can afford it, if you can do it. I would like to give health care to everyone if we could. But you have to be able to afford it first, Brigid. And so the problem is we have the most generous health benefit in the country at a time when we can't really afford it. And here's something that Senator Orho reminds me of all the time. Obamacare, which I support very much, has a Cadillac tax. And they keep pushing it off in Washington. They keep pushing it off. But anyone that has above a gold health care plan, you're going to get hit with a 40% Cadillac tax probably in the next 4 or 5 years. Well, we're platinum, which means our whole healthcare system would increase 40%. I mean, by doing nothing. So just the fact that we have the most generous system, most expensive system, and we're facing this 40% increase in cost when I can't fund other programs that matter to us, it doesn't need a building again falling in on you to understand that if we don't do something, it's all going to collapse. It's a house of cards. And what you said earlier was this is barring any kind of fiscal correction that's coming. There's going to be an adjustment. Hopefully it won't be a recession. It's the longest bull market in the history of the nation. And things just can't continue to go this way. Things are softening up. So I talked to some financial people say that the second half of next year, you're going to start to see a correction. If that happens, New Jersey we don't have any reserves really to guard against it. We won't be able to pay any of our bills.
I'm certain that the audience will have plenty of questions concerning pension and benefit reform. And you, of course, are aware that there will be significant union opposition to switching from platinum to gold. Let's turn our attention, though, to two other major reform areas that have a direct impact on K-12 education quality and property taxes. School district regionalization and special education. Can you first talk a bit about the proposal to merge school districts?
Sure, but you got to understand where we're coming from with it. Former Commissioner Lucille Davey basically talked to us and they said that the K-4s, K-5, 6, and 8s, they go to a regional high school. Anybody go to a regional high school here? Okay. Well, you have 4 or 5 different school districts that are sending kids to the one high school. They're not coordinating curriculum. So kids are learning at different levels. So you have some kids that are up here, some kids are here. So what normally happens is you bring it down to the level for all the kids to learn at. And we feel we can really improve education by doing that. There's a savings, there's a financial savings too, but that's not what's driving it. It's more making sure that, and everyone says, well, we have great schools. We absolutely have some of the greatest schools in the country, but they can be even better. And the goal is to move the kids. And here's the scare tactic, which we will get from the NJEA. You're going to move the kids all over the place. No, the kids can stay in the school buildings where they're at. The difference is they'll have a principal in the building, but not an administration.
So not a superintendent.
Not a superintendent, not a whole HR department, because you'd have that at the regional level. And you can now ensure that everyone's got the same 4th grade history books, that they're all teaching the same 5th grade math. So when the kids come to high school, that they're all basically in the same place and prepared to really learn. Because if you send kids to a regional high school to go to college or whatever they're going to do, and you trust them to go there, why wouldn't you trust them to coordinate the education as they go?
So what would you see as the unit of this regionalization? Would it be a county system or municipalities or?
Well, that's actually in there too, to create 2 pilot county school districts. But what this is seen as is the existing regional high schools that we have, converting them into K-12s instead of regional high schools. And you would go from 600 school districts to 320. That's a big savings, although we're not saying, and we're not doing it for that reason. And I'll give you an example. I represent Salem County, as you said. There's 67,000 people in all of Salem County. They got 5 high schools. They might have 8,000 kids. You know, the numbers just don't make a whole lot of sense. And, you know, Sussex County in the northern part of the state, their county freeholders have actually been talking about that and wanted to take a vote on it to start trying to improve education, not sacrifice education, but make it more efficient.
Is it possible to use some of that cost savings from decreased administrative cost to either reduce property tax burden or to improve programmatic?
For me, it's to improve the delivery of education.
Right.
To squeeze those dollars, to reduce class size, to buy technology. You know what I mean? To really make us, we always talk about being second or third, make us number one. And make us number one by a large margin, because we're taking the dollars and putting them back and really improving our delivery of education. And we have great schools, I say that, but they can be better.
What about special education? So what are the most important components of the reforms that?
Well, Senator Joe Panaccio from Morris County recommended that, you know, special education is a real fight in every single school district. So we were talking about raising extraordinary special education to the state level, funding it 100% at the state level.
Explain what extraordinary special education is.
It's for kids that are very severely disabled, high cost kids. And what happens is, you know, and this gets really offensive to me personally when you hear, oh, we just had 3 families with children with disabilities moved in, and there goes our school budget. Well, just because someone has got a disability doesn't mean that person isn't able to learn and isn't a valuable citizen. But we look at it like, oh, it's just too expensive. So you have some school districts that won't invest the kind of money that you need, you know, to give that child an education. So because they don't want the child in their school system. So by taking it to the state level, you eliminate that. And that doesn't happen. And the other thing, Brigid, is one of the recommendations we have is, you know, a lot of times there's a lot of litigation that goes on with special education, that we would take 3 administrative law judges and have them do nothing but special ed cases. Because once they get seasoned, and that's all they're doing, you know, you're going to speed up the amount of time that you're litigating, and I think families will even think, well, that judge, this wasn't the first case that judge ever did, that this is all that judge does, and by that, you'll have parents a little bit more comfortable that they're getting fair shakes.
It would also eliminate people shopping around for quality schools for their special needs.
Well, Rich, I'll give you an example. When I first moved to Gloucester County and my daughter was born, I told people, I said, I was asking everybody. I was just getting involved. I was on the vocational school board, and I asked people. I said, where should I live? Because I would have moved to Delaware, I would have moved to New York, I would have Pennsylvania. It didn't matter. My daughter was going to get the best education possible, and where I lived was secondary. And I think most parents feel that way.
Any other components of the special education reforms that you wanted to talk about?
No, the big one is this extraordinary special ed. Eventually, I would love to get in a situation where we can take all special education, you know, and bring it all to the state. But what happened with that, we had that at one time.
So when you talk about that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're talking about both funding and administration.
No, funding.
Okay.
Funding it. What happened back in the mid-90s, the state funded special education. So what was happening was school districts were classifying kids that didn't need to be classified to get additional funding. That's why they went with a census model. It's, you know, because, you know, the school districts don't do it now, but I really do believe that taking that burden from one community to the other by funding it on the state level, you won't have that negative feeling towards a person when they come in with a disability.
New Jersey has taken some steps to encourage municipal shared service agreements and joint meetings. These efforts have not always been successful. They've been sometimes maligned by municipal elected officials, other times embraced. Can you talk a little bit about the plan's recommendation to encourage municipalities and counties in order to better achieve these economies of scale?
Well, I live in Gloucester County, as I said a few times, and my home county has done more shared services than any place in the state.
So what does that look like?
You know, it's funny, people object until it happens because they don't know what the change looks like, Brigid, so everyone fears it. Once it happens, people seem to be very comfortable with it because it works. My county is the only county in the state that has countywide ambulance. When we proposed it, we had ambulances driving around the courthouse protesting us. I mean, legitimately driving around the courthouse. We passed it, and the reason why we were doing it was response times were like 14 minutes, which is way too long, and there's a thing called missed calls, which is when you call into an ambulance squad and they don't answer, you gotta wait 4 minutes and call in again. So now you're at 8 minutes before you can call out for mutual aid, which means any other community around. My home county's average response times are under 6 minutes. We have less ambulances than they had before, and we're better. The point is, you know, everyone doesn't have to have everything. You know, we're the only county in the state that has countywide tax assessment, or we have another state that has it, another county has it now. But stormwater management, police dispatch, you know, everyone says it doesn't work. We actually dispatch, police dispatch, emergency response dispatch for 6 towns in Atlantic County. So you can do things county to county. One of the things I'm most proud of that was accomplished after I left was the completion of the elimination of our jail system. Gloucester County is the only county in the state that doesn't have a jail.
And what do you do with your prisoners?
We send the prisoners to jails that have space. We were spending $28 million a year on corrections. We're spending about 13, 14. So, you know, it's like population's being served. No one lost a job. They through attrition, they shrank what they needed to shrink. Because every time you're talking about someone losing a job, that is a family. And you don't want to hurt the family. So we found a way to actually, like I said, we're the only county in the state that doesn't have a jail. It's pretty cool.
So how would you ideally encourage these kinds of cooperation between counties or municipalities moving forward?
Because we put a 2% cap in place, it forced the conversation. Towns would not come in because, look, it's not a knock. People like to be able to pick the police chief. People like to say, the public works director is my guy. You know, they like to do that. And so no one wants to give up any territory. But, you know, putting a 2% cap in place actually forced towns to start looking to reduce costs to get underneath the cap.
So do you think that beyond the 2% cap, there's the possibility of incentivizing these kind of cooperations?
Well, you know, I get frustrated with that because I'm like, you ran for the job. You know, you wanted to be the mayor. You wanted to be the freeholder. Well, if you want the job, then you're supposed to do it. And the job is to deliver government at the most affordable cost. I had 2 mayors that were mayors for at least 10 years. And they came to me and they said, you know, we just merged trash collection. And we're both saving $125,000 a year. And I said, well, you want me to give you a medal? I said, come on, that's what you're supposed to do. This is your job. You know, but, you know, I don't know if financially giving incentives works because they had programs back in the 90s and the early 2000s. I think it was Ready and Reap.
Right.
And they were to give you a benefit to do what you're elected to do in the first place. You know, no one's going to argue that New Jersey doesn't have the highest property taxes in the country. So how do you reduce them? By finding ways to be more efficient. You still need to have police. You know what I'm saying? You still need good schools. You want clean streets. Well, believe it or not, there's a lot of places that do it a lot more cost effective than we do in New Jersey. So, you know, some people say, well, why don't you just make it county government? And some people say, well, do away with county government, make it municipal government. Or maybe you do a hybrid based on the size of the county where it makes sense and it's more efficient. But, you know, we're going to have those conversations. Governor Murphy appointed 2 shared service czars. And I met him the other day, and I said they could have used a better term. Because, you know, czars normally get killed. You know? So we said, you know, we got 2 shared services gurus that we look to work with to really come up with and say just the common sense things. Brigid, it's no different than your own budget at your own house. It's very easy to do once you get used to doing it. but you have to get used to the opposition that they're going to stand up and say no to anything you want to do because they want to keep the status quo. And normally that's the minority of people that are out protesting. You know, it's not the majority. The majority expect you to do your job. I elected you to do it, do it.
So the Economic and Fiscal Policy Working Group was established to develop policy responses to a federal tax plan that limited the deductibility of property taxes paid that exceed $10,000, the SALT tax deduction, right? The new federal policy, just to give you some context, has compounded residents' concerns regarding property taxes, which rank among the highest in the nation. The $28.8 billion in property taxes collected in fiscal year 2017 were twice the $14.4 billion in state income taxes and were 3 times the state's $9.4 billion in sales taxes. What are the proposals to help New Jerseyans deal with the increased burden presented both by the limitation of the SALT tax deduction, but also to make other taxes fairer and more equitable?
Well, you just ran some numbers that realize most of the taxation in the state is at the local level. They're large numbers. In fact, the state government returns 74% of the dollars they take go back to the towns. So, you know, we're looking at legislation, but right now no one's even going to, we actually passed legislation, Brigid, to deal with the SALT issue, but no one's going to address it because the IRS has came out and objected to it. And the reality is we fund our government based on property taxes. Well, under this SALT change, our properties are supposed to decrease by 7%. Now, if people start going to get their properties revalued, we have a major problem because we lost 7% of our dollars. They just poof, they're gone. And you know, I'm not happy that it was done, but I can understand what was going down in Washington and say, look at these states. They're just raising taxes as much as they want to raise them because we pay, you know, they can write it off. And you know, New Jersey sends more to Washington than they come back. So we feel like we're being treated unfairly, but also we do need to do a better job of reducing cost, and we haven't really started yet. You know, we're just at shared service has been talked about forever, and we're just really at the edges of it. And I tell people, if I can do it, it's easy enough to do. And the SALT laws that we passed, not one community has stepped up to do it yet because of the IRS.
Are there any other changes to the tax structure that you think that would make it a bit fairer or more equitable?
Well, right now we have our experts looking at trying to find ways to make it work more. Fact is, we have to deal with the reality. They did it. It's been passed. And unless the federal government changes it, we're dealing with this. So shared services is one way of getting at cost. But like I said, we really have to step up and change, not for the purpose of change, but the purpose to improve. And we haven't really scratched the surface on how we can bring costs down.
Okay, so before we take some of the audience's questions, let me ask you a final political question. Some would make the allegation that you're all the way up here in North Jersey, making these proposals as kind of an opening salvo aimed at a 2021 gubernatorial election, perhaps a primary run against Governor Murphy. Given that perception, or perhaps that reality, do you think that Governor Murphy will support these proposals?
Listen, I certainly hope so. You know, the governor actually, I think it was back in 2005, came up with his own plan, which was pretty close to what we did back in 2011. The governor absolutely understands the finances of the state. You know, just look where he came from, the industry he came from. I'm doing this because I've been doing this since I got to the legislature. You know, back in 2002, I started privately talking to union leaders saying, how are you going to fix your pension? You know, look what you did to it. You know, pensions aren't free. They game the system. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, you know, back in 2005, if you remember, I couldn't walk through the Capitol without state police around me because of, you know, how ugly it got. And it's like, again, I wasn't emotional about it. I'm just looking at your pensions. I know pensions. they're going bankrupt, and you're not showing any leadership to your members by bringing them in. People can handle the truth, Brigid, if you tell them and you explain it to them. But what happened here was everyone just enjoyed telling everybody everything's the sun's shining when it's raining.
So, I mean, I haven't heard a whole lot. It's no secret that one of the great divides politically was that Governor Murphy enjoyed the backing of the NJEA for his gubernatorial run. And obviously, you being an NJEA target, despite the fact that you're both Democrats, there is no love lost there in that divide. Do you think that Governor Murphy, I have not heard a whole lot coming out of his office with regard to pension and benefit reform, and he's been in office now for 10 months. Do you think that is the driving force behind this whole package of reforms, right? That is the number one priority that has to be targeted. Do you think that that's something that he's been rather mum on? Do you think it's something that he would bite off and perhaps alienate one of his core-based constituencies?
Well, I don't think we're going to have a choice at some point. I tell people whenever I go to these different meetings, I remember the movie Network. I'm mad as hell,
and I'm not going to take it anymore.
But the reality is that we can't afford the structure we have. We raised taxes $1.7 billion this year, and every penny of that's spent. With what's going to happen with pension and health care next year, there won't be any additional money for New Jersey Transit unless you raise taxes. What are taxes? There won't be any more money for education, to add on to education, unless you raise taxes. And we're really at a place where it's time to fix the problem. And again, work with the unions. Because the unions, we did a thing called reverse auction for prescription management, pharmaceutical management, PBMs. This state, working with them, we saved $1.5 billion over 3 years. And it was my legislation, but the unions backed it and supported it. And we have patient-centered primary care medical home centers. That's a mouthful. That's another area where we're saving a couple $100 million a year by providing better health care and changing the system. And that was worked with the unions. I think the unions, if we can get in a room and start showing them, open the books, show them the numbers. And no, I'm not raising the sales tax to 8%, because you could talk about raising taxes if you fix the structural problem. If you don't fix the structural problem, you can never raise enough taxes, Brigid. So Governor Murphy has to recognize, and I think he recognizes, perfectly honest with you, the dire straits we are financially. And if we want to make investments, we're going to have to deal with the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And, we just came through a challenge over school funding, if you remember. It was a big 18-month battle. I ran all over the state like I am right now. And the governor signed S2, Senate Bill S2, which fixed the school funding. But now the only way it's fixed if we continue to fund into it. But we corrected the problems that existed, and people said, well, that would never happen. Well, it did happen. So it's just a matter of working real hard with the governor, with the speaker, because that's the other component too. The speaker's a big piece of this. Work together, and let's start fixing things.
Why don't we turn to the audience, since this is a town hall? I think that there are people with microphones, and so if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand, and one of our audience members will, or one of our students will give you a mic.
Any questions? Any questions? Does anyone have any questions? What's your name?
Cullen?
What is it?
Cullen.
Cullen has a question.
I just recently looked this up. The average teacher salary in New Jersey is about 68,000. And I was going through a bunch of salaries of superintendents as an example in New Jersey, and those ranged from low 100,000s, 117,000 usually, up to mid 200,000s. 240 something was the highest I've seen. You said lowering pensions to help the budget in New Jersey, but that's one of the benefits that attracts teachers, at least from what I've researched and seen during college and high school. Do you think that maybe lowering the administrative salaries in New Jersey and raising the teacher salary might be a good way to balance budget and help education in New Jersey?
Well, first off, that's the average salary of a teacher, right?
Yes.
That means teachers make much more and some make less.
Yes.
They tried the superintendent salary cap, and we lost a lot of our superintendents to other states because they didn't cap their salaries. You know, you're talking about there's 600 superintendents, there's 200,000 teachers. We're not looking to hurt teachers. Believe me when I tell you that. What we want to do is come up with a system that when you come into it, you know that if we promise you this pension and this health care, that it's going to be there. Instead of what we deal with year in and year out, which is a fight, and we shut the state down, and we have crisis after crisis. So listen, I'm very pro-teacher. You know, I don't agree with the leadership of their organization because I don't think they lead their members. I don't think they tell them the truth. But that's not addressing, you know, I think teachers should make more money. I really do. You know, but we have to deal with the problems that exist today. I told you the pension payment should have been less than $1 billion. It's 3.2 on the way to 6.7 because people actually took benefits that they didn't pay for. So that puts you in a bad spot, puts you behind the 8 ball. I could go on and on about the Whitman bond deal that they borrowed $2.8 billion. The interest rate was locked in at 7.5, not recallable. In 2027, it'll be $10.8 billion we pay back to borrow 2.8. You know, which again, these all have impacts. There was $468 million in this year's budget to pay for a bond in 1997 that didn't do anything to build schools, do anything but create an overfunding of the pensions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about how we got to this system where governors of both political parties?
Oh, sure. Listen, back in 1997, Governor Whitman decided that she didn't want to make the pension to the pension payment. So they went and bonded the pension system, the pension payment, $2.8 billion. I told you about what it cost us, right? Well, it created an overfunding on paper. And when your pensions are overfunded, you have to make enhancements. So what happened was, for the public side, they reduced their contribution from 5.5 to 3.5. But it wasn't really an overfunding. It was fake. So now you're depriving the pension of dollars that it really needs. So now we're still overfunded, and I forget what year it was. They said, well, we're going to lower the retirement age 5 years, which means now you can retire 5 years sooner. Well, you can do that, but it has a cost to it. You know what I mean? Like there's so much money you have to pay to be able to retire sooner. And then in 2001, which was the straw that broke the camel's back, Democrats and Republicans together voted to give everyone a 9% increase in their pension. Every single retiree, every future worker. That's 800,000 people, a 9% raise without funding it. Why are we broke? Geez, how that happen? The reality is they're just numbers, guys. You know, and you know, when you do things like that, pensions are easy to figure out. If you want a certain benefit at the end, you make an assumption. Assumption is what you assume your investments are going to make, right? And 7.5 is too high a number. But we at one time were at 8.75. When they did that bond, we were at 8.75%. So they created a system that was going to, you know, get us to this point. Now, for the leaders at the time, they looked like heroes. They looked like super people. Hey, look, I just reduced your contribution. Well, it was free. I just lowered your retirement age 5 years. Oh, wow, that's great. How much? No, it's free. I just gave you a 9% raise. Really? Oh, wow, that's great. How much? Free. It ain't free. And it broke the pension system, unfortunately. So the teachers, the public employees, the public workforce today is stuck with the burden of the legacy of what happened back then. And it's not fair. It's not fair that I got the Whitman Bond Act that I got to deal with. You know what I'm saying? None of it's fair, but the realities are, and what's not fair is we have the second most expensive higher education system in the nation. Other states are targeting our students based on what our tuition is for out-of-state tuition to be equal to New Jersey's. And when young people leave, they have a tendency to stay away. And we made too much of an investment in you growing up here. You grew up in New Jersey? We made way too much of an investment that we want to see you go somewhere else. We want to get the fruit of that investment. So that's what it is.
Other questions for the senator?
Over here. Okay.
Hi. I was concerned about the business tax climate. The Tax Foundation this year and for the last few years has ranked New Jersey dead last among the 50 states for its business tax climate. I was curious what kind of policy proposals you would support to rectify that, or if that is important to you. And also, secondly, do you fear tax flight of individuals and corporations a la California and Connecticut?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and just so you know, I was the one that proposed the corporate business tax increase, because that was the C corporations were the one organization that really benefited from the Trump administration. They gained $2.9 billion. But that being said, I sunset it for one reason. We needed cash to do these reforms to get to the other side of it, get to the other end. The fact that New Jersey's in a situation where we're ranked dead last, corporations don't want to come here. So, they're here because they're already here location-wise, or we're giving them large tax incentives. If we don't change our tax policy, look, we did some tax cuts. When I first became Senate President, we cut the business tax like $540 million. But there needs to be more of a pro-business friendly climate if you want to keep people. We're losing people. We're losing a lot of wealth. I met with a banker that told me when they net it, after all these taxes, they net it over the last 5 years, we lost $20 billion net in dollars that should be here that are somewhere else. You got to realize Pennsylvania has a flat tax of 3%. So we just raised our tax on millionaires that make over $5 million to 10.75. You know how much easier it'll be? You could buy a helicopter and fly in each day. So we got to be careful with our tax policy, and we want to do things that actually make a difference, like raising the minimum wage. We're going to raise the minimum wage to $15. Well, if we raise the minimum wage, that's going to cost us, as we gear up, close to $500 million that the state has to come up with. Because if we're going to contract with people, if we're going to tell everyone else that you got to raise the minimum wage, we got to raise the minimum wage. So, it's just their numbers, and the numbers don't work for us right now.
I had a question.
Yeah, I'll stand out there so I don't bother the reporter here. Hi there, Senator. I just had a question. You mentioned that you favor higher education and more spending towards higher education. I was just wondering, more specifically, what do you mean? Do you mean by more scholarships to students, or investing more in public universities? Thank you.
All the above. We did a bond act during the Christie administration that I was the prime sponsor of. That was $750 million. And you see a couple of new buildings, and in fact, this building is one of them, that you can see the difference that it made by making the investment. But the other problem we have is, one, we need infrastructure. Two, we have to provide, our TAG and EOF programs are great. We need to continue to expand and grow them. But then we need to provide more funding per student, per school. Dr. Cole showed me that this school is the lowest funded one in the state. And they're doing what we want. They're growing. Since 2006 to now, they've increased over 5,000 students. And we want to try to keep as many dollars as we can in New Jersey, because we're the #1 exporter of kids, right? We average 35,000 kids a year leave. That's $6 billion worth of dollars that could be spent in New Jersey that's being spent somewhere else. So no, all above it, all three areas need to see investment. And I told Dr. Cole, we got to at least set a floor that everyone's at the same place, because right now everybody's all over the place.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, with regard to school funding, you just got S2 through, it kind of equalizes school funding on K-12 level. Would you sponsor or support a similar kind of measure in higher education?
We're we were talking about establishing a floor. You know, I just talked to Dr. Cole about it, where at least bring everyone up to a certain level, and then as we can grow into it, we can increase a couple % a year till we get everybody to the same place. You know, yeah, I definitely support something like that, and ask Dr. Cole to run some numbers so we could focus on where we can start funding and actually strengthen the schools. She showed me in 2006 they were getting $50 million a year here, which is not big. They're now down to $35 million. It's the direction that is not helpful to sustain schools like this. And what happens? It goes on the backs of the students at the end of the day with more fees and more costs.
Other questions?
Hi, I have a question regarding the workers that don't have pensions, you know, like waitresses and waiters and people in construction. What kind of healthcare are they going to be provided since, you know, mostly those people are usually on their own?
Well, New Jersey has a very healthy family care plan that we provide health benefits for people that don't have insurance. Obamacare is another area, but we do have a healthy program. As far as pensions, we're actually doing a bill called Secure Choice, which actually forces employers to save a percentage of your wage so that you'll have something when, you know, that you could take if you change employers. The debate was, actually it was my bill the first time they did it. We're coming up with the second version of it. And
So like a Roth IRA?
huh?
So like a Roth IRA, in a way.
Yeah, something like that. Well, no, actually like a nest egg or retirement fund.
Okay.
Like we would like take 3% of your earnings. Your employer would be forced to put 3% of your earnings into a retirement plan that would be, you know, wouldn't be risky. It would be a retirement plan, but you would start to build. And even if you're not making a lot of money, which I wish I had learned when I was young, you know, when the earlier you start to save, you'd be surprised what you wind up with as you get older. Yes.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming tonight. You had mentioned infrastructure earlier. As you know, in the state of New Jersey, infrastructure is in dire conditions. I've heard some proposals about triple Ps being in place to help fund infrastructure. Can you expand a little bit more on what you see and what programs are out there that could help improve the infrastructure in the state?
Well, we just passed a really comprehensive P3 bill for infrastructure because, you know, back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, most of your money came from the federal government. That's not going to happen anymore. So you have to be innovative and think outside the box. And really, Europe's been way in advance of us on these issues. So when this P3 bill, the previous P3 bill focused on colleges, you know, and that's where you saw a lot of the dorms being built. And so we've expanded it for infrastructure. And like, again, I'm the co-labor chair of 2 pension funds. That's where we're looking to invest because that's where you're going to get your best return. And, you know, you're going to get a solid return. And you're actually going to start generating and improving infrastructure. What's wrong here is back in 2002, we needed to raise the gas tax a nickel. And everyone came out and said, oh my God, that's too much money, it can't happen. Well, we ignored problems. Then we had governors that extended debt instead of 20 years to 30 years. You know what I mean? So everyone, the kick in the can thing, you'll hear it over and over again. Everyone didn't, not on my watch. Not on my watch. And we got to a point where I'm here now. It's on my watch, and we got to deal with it. So the P3 bill is actually, I think we're leading. In fact, Governor Murphy said it too. We are #1 in the country with the type of legislation we passed. So we should start to see that type of investment because we want to finish the Hudson-Bergen line. That's a big, big, important piece of transportation. We also want to build the Gloucester-Camden one down by me. And mass transportation never pays for itself, just so you know. So there's a supplement, but mass transportation improves quality of life, improves property values. You know, wherever you see a rail stop, it's recreated a lot of our communities like Jersey City, Hoboken. You look around it, they just have made enormous turnarounds because of mass transportation.
Well, can you please, before I ask for a round of applause for Senator Sweeney, I wanted to mention that this is the first of the Salon series I would ask you all to please join us in November, I think it's November 27th, when former Governor Florio will come on campus and talk about the theme of leadership. But now, if you could please thank Senator Sweeney for coming to Montclair State University.
Thank you. Thank you.